607 bodies. That is the toll a new report puts on 27 months of Operation Kagaar in Bastar. Not from the government, from a newspaper archive, stitched together line by a human rights group, because the government itself would not say. On 30th March 2026, the Union Home Minister stood in the Lok Sabha and declared the country Naxal-free. Today we ask, free of what? And at what cost? And who actually decided this war should end this way? Hello, I'm Asad Ashraf and this is the India Report from Newsreel Asia. Every week we take 3 stories and look at what's actually behind them, the context behind an incident or a policy and how it lands on ordinary people. Stay with us. I'm going to walk you through a report released this month by the People's Union for Democratic Rights titled Reddening the Green. It documents Operation Kagaar, the joint central state offensive that ran from January 2024 to March 2026 across Bastar's 7 districts. PUDR could not conduct field work on the ground, so it builds its record from newspaper reports, mainly the Bastar edition of Dainik Bhaskar, cross-checked against national dailies. That itself tells you something about the information environment this war was fought in. Let me give you the numbers first, because everything else sits on the top of them. 607 killed, 516 alleged Maoists killed, 55 civilians killed, 35 security personnel killed, 487 arrests, 1,496 surrenders. Compare that to 2021 and 2023, when the government figures recorded around a third of that death toll. From 51 Maoists killed in 2021 and 20 in 2023, the number jumps to 217 in 2024, then 256 in 2025. Bijapur district alone accounted for 69 of the killing incidents. Sukma had 25, Narayanpur 27, including operations inside the Abujmar forest area. Kondagaon had just 1. This is where the war actually lived. Here is the paradox PUDR names. This war was fought in full public view, reported constantly, and yet almost nothing about it can be independently verified because the information came from one place, and one place only, the government and the security forces themselves. PUDR counts 14 incidents across the 27 months where more than 10 people were killed in a single encounter. In a 12 May 2024 case in Bijapur, police said they had killed 12 Maoists. Relatives who came to claim the body said the dead were not Maoists at all. In a December 2024 case, 1,000-strong joint forces claimed 7 kills. The Maoist party's own response said only 2 of the 7 were their cadre, the rest villagers. In a 29th May 2024 case, police claimed 2 killed and 2 arrested, while villagers said 8 people were from the village were missing. No inquiry, no follow-ups. There is a way of describing this kind of power in politics. The state does not just govern who lives, it decides as a policy rather than exception who may be killed. Kagaar fits in that frame uncomfortably well. The state announced rewards per Maoist killed and revised its surrender policy in 2025 to offer Adivasi cadre a binary choice: come in or be killed. The Supreme Court's 2014 PUCL judgment set out 16 requirements for investigating any encounter death: independent investigation by a separate team, a magisterial inquiry, forensic recovery of weapons, prompt notification of next of kin, 6 monthly reporting to the National Human Rights Commission, and a ban on rewarding officers before their conduct is cleared. The report argues that PUCL was built for isolated individual encounters, not a 27-month campaign directed from the level of the Inspector General of Police and the Union Home Minister. When violence becomes state policy rather than a policing lapse, a junior officer's investigation cannot hold that machinery to account.
और मैं मानता हूं मित्रों कि अब समय आ गया है कि वामपंथी उग्रवाद की समस्या पर एक मजबूत रणनीति के साथ, रूथलेस रणनीति के साथ अंतिम प्रहार किया जाए.
That meeting pulled the NIA, CRPF, Cobra Battalion, BSF, Sashastra Seema Bal and ITBP alongside Chhattisgarh's own Special Task Force and District Reserve Guard. By the government's own account, total security presence in the campaign's final 2 years reached 66,000 personnel. Here is the part that matters most politically. In April 2025, the Central Committee of the CPI MOIS said it was ready for peace talks on condition that Kagaar stopped. The government of India turned the offer down. PUDR calls this the only realistic chance of a negotiated end to the conflict, rejected in favor of continued military escalation. So when the state says this war had to end this way, the report's answer is it didn't. There was another door and the government shut it. This political choice sits inside a parallel, quieter offensive, a decade of regulatory change that has made Bastar's forest easier to mine than at any point since independence. Mining leases extended from 30 to 50 years, a new category of private forest carved out of the protected land. The Gram Sabha's right to face prior and informed consent affirmed by the Supreme Court in 2013 Niyamgiri judgment routinely bypassed or PUDR says forged. The money tells its own story. Around 8,860 crore rupees went into security expenditure between 2017 and 25 alone. Another 20,815 crore went into road building and 4,080 crore into mobile towers, both of which PUDR notes double as military infrastructure. Chhattisgarh's industrial policy for 2024 to 2030 earmarks over 52,000 crore rupees for Bastar, more than 80% of it going to NMDC, the state mining major. Private companies for the first time have been granted access to mine the Bailadila Hills, and the long dormant Bodhghar Dam project has been revived. And when Adivasi groups organize against this through constitutional non-violent forums like Moolwasi Bachao Manch, formed after police fired on a 2021 protest in Silgar that killed 4 people, the state banned them under a colonial-style public security law. Its vice president, Sunita Pottam, faced prosecution in 16 separate cases. She has been acquitted in at least 11 and remains in detention regardless. Now to what happens to the people arrested or who surrenders, because this is where the report is most damning. Of the 487 arrests PUDR tracked, 50 have no record date at all. And 33 name a crime but no FIR number, no case status, nothing to follow. Not one case in the entire records includes an FIR number. Once such cases reach trial, conviction is rare. A separate study of Gadchiroli in Maharashtra examining 141 Naxal cases between 2002 and 2015 found 148 ended in acquittal. That is not just a justice correcting system itself. That is a system built to detain first and prosecute, if at all, much later. And those who surrendered are not necessarily free either. Reporting cited in the study describes surrender camps functioning as informal detention centers, people held for months barred from seeing family, promised vacation training that turns out to be cleaning and construction work. Any cash reward is logged in for a fixed deposit for 3 years, released only if police certify good conduct. The amnesty comes with its own custody. Meanwhile, in Chhattisgarh jails, more broadly, the state's own Deputy Chief Minister told the Assembly this February that 66 inmates had died over the previous 13 months. Judicial inquiries had been completed in just 18 of those cases. So when the state says Bastar is Naxal-free, ask what that phrase is actually doing. It closes a chapter on an armed insurgency that has run for over 5 decades. It says nothing about a Gram Sabha's right to consent before its forest becoming a mining lease. Nothing about a peace offer made and refused in April 2025. Nothing about a body returned to a family decomposed without a post-mortem, without an FIR, without an investigation that ever reached a court. The question this raises in national politics is who counts as a life worth protecting under law and who is merely administered, managed, counted. Bastars, Adivasis, those killed, those arrested, and those who surrender were, on this evidence, never quite treated as the former. And the point worth remembering is that markets don't clear land on their own. Someone has to do the clearing. The war, the government tells us, is over. The report suggests it has simply changed its instruments. That was Bastar, a war that state says is over, and a report that says the reckoning hasn't even started. Now, staying with the theme of what a state chooses to remember and what it chooses to bury, let's move to Punjab, because this week a very different kind of erasure played out, not in a forest but on a streaming app. Let me tell you a story about a man, a film, and a party that spent 30 years telling that man's story until it didn't. His name was Jaswant Singh Khalra. In the early 1990s, he headed the human rights wing of Punjab's Akali Dal, and he did something almost nobody else was willing to do. He went to the cremation ground in Tarn Taran and started counting. Thousands of bodies, unidentified, secretly burned, the remains of people the security forces had killed during the counter-insurgency years and simply erased from the record. Khalra put numbers and names to what the state wanted forgotten. In 1995, he was abducted. He was never seen again. 4 Punjab police officers were later convicted for his murder. You see, this is not a disputed story. It is a settled history. And for 30 years, one party has used it again and again as a weapon against the other. That party is the BJP. Every time it wanted to remind Punjab which government presided over the disappearances, the unmarked graves, the militancy years, it reached for exactly this story. Let me bring in an idea here because I think it explains exactly what's happening. In politics, what a society remembers and what it forgets is shaped by whoever holds power in the present. Call it collective memory, and the key insight is this: the past is not fixed, it's constantly reassembled to fit the needs of the group or the government doing the remembering. Seen this way, Khalra's story was never just history sitting quietly in the archive. For 30 years, the BJP actively kept it alive because it served the party's present purpose, drawing a line between itself and Congress. That is collective memory being built, deliberately, incident by incident, speech by speech. But the same idea also tells you the opposite can happen. The same power that keeps a memory alive can just as easily suppress it the moment that memory stops serving the present and starts threatening it. Satluj did not just repeat the story the BJP had been telling, it gave it a face, a lead actor, a mass streaming audience, and crucially, it located the killing inside a security apparatus that outlived any one government. That's the moment collective memory becomes dangerous to the people who built it. So they reached for this other tool in the same toolbox, forgetting enforced from above. Here is what doesn't add up. And this idea helps explain it. The BJP has never had a problem with films about victims. The Kashmir Files, the Kerala Story, even Dhurandhar films with their own factual disputes, sailed through sometimes with ministers standing next to the posters, and AAP leaders have pointed to exactly this comparison. Those films point outward other communities at a previous opposition-run state. They fit neatly into a memory that ruling party once told. Satluj points inward, at the Indian state's own security machinery, the one that operated under Congress in Punjab and in Delhi in the 1990s, but that, as institutions do, carried on largely intact under the governments that followed. A film blaming someone else clears the runway. A film blaming the machinery of the state itself gets pulled within 48 hours. And here's the part that really undoes the BJP's own argument. Its case against Congress in Punjab was never just you did this. It was we, unlike you, will let people know you did this. That's a collective memory, a political brand 30 years in the making. Removing this film takes that brand away. A party cannot claim to trust the public with the truth, and then the one time that truth reaches a mass audience on a streaming platform, order it gone within 2 days. Even inside the BJP, this landed badly. Punjab State President Keval Singh Dhillon appealed the decision that led the ministry to form a 3-member review committee. I read that appeal as genuine discomfort. A state unit that knows this does not sit right with the story it spent decades telling voters. But the decision the public actually saw was still the removal. Whatever argument happened behind closed doors, the film came down and it stayed down. And Congress, for its part, has said almost nothing. One MP called it unfortunate. That's close to the whole of it, which makes sense in a way because Congress has no interest in defending a film that indicts its own government in Punjab and at the center through the very years it's describing. Two parties, usually happy to blame each other for everything, have gone quiet on the exact same film. And that's not a coincidence. Collective memory is not owned by one party at a time. It's owned by whichever institutions survive the change of the government and the counter-insurgency apparatus Khalra spent his life documenting is exactly that kind of institution. It didn't belong to Congress alone, it carried on. A film that names individuals and traces that continuity threatens both parties equally. The BJP spent 3 decades building a memory it could use against Congress. This week, given the chance to let that memory reach that public on its own terms, unedited on a mass platform, it chose the same silence it has spent 30 years accusing Congress of. And that, more than the film itself, is the story worth remembering. 2 weeks ago, there was a ceasefire. This week, there is not. And somewhere in between, an Indian-invested port in Iran found itself in the line of fire. Let me tell you how this unfolded, because it moved fast. Back in February, the United States and Israel launched a joint offensive against Iran, code-named Operation Epic Fury. It killed Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, as we all know, in the opening strike and triggered months of missiles and drones flying across the Gulf. By June, the two sides had reached a memorandum of understanding, a truce meant to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and end the war. It lasted about 2 weeks.
We hit them very hard last night, very hard. Probably hit them hard again tonight. I'll give them a little warning, we're going to hit them hard tonight. They launched a couple of drones and 1 rocket, 1 missile, and at ships, because they were in the strait, which they have every right to be.
Here is where India enters, and I want you to picture the map for a second. On Iran's southeastern coast sits the port of Chabahar. India has poured money into that port for years, precisely to get access to Afghanistan and Central Asia without going through Pakistan. It's meant to be India's strategic alternative route. This week, as the US widened its strike inside Iran, Chabahar, the very port India built its regional strategy around, found itself inside the target zone. Now, why does any of this matter to someone filling up a scooter in Lucknow? Because 33 kilometers of water called the Strait of Hormuz, sitting between Iran and Oman, roughly a fifth of the world's oil and a lot of its gas moves through that strait. So when Iran says the strait is closed or fires on tankers near it, that is not a headline about someone else's war. That's a direct line to your cooking gas cylinder. You saw it happen in real time this week. On Wednesday, when Trump said the ceasefire had collapsed, India's stock market fell more than 2% in a single session. The Sensex dropping over 1,900 points at one stage. Brent crude, the international oil benchmark, jumped close to 5%, touching nearly $79 a barrel by Thursday. Now, here is the more hopeful part of the story though, and I think it's worth understanding properly. India does not buy Iranian crude, hasn't for years because of US sanctions. So when analysts say the impact of India is indirect, what they mean is this: there is no sudden hole in supply, only a more expensive one. India now buys a mix of Russian, American, Saudi, UAE crude, and that mix has been doing real work. Saudi Arabia recently announced its steepest price cut for Asian buyers in 20 years, partly to cushion exactly this kind of shock. Tanker traffic through Hormuz remains 60 to 70% below what it was before the war, and Indian refiners have still managed largely to keep the taps running through alternative routes. But diversified doesn't mean immune. If this standoff drags on, analysts expect India's crude import basket, currently landing around $68 a barrel, to climb past 75, maybe higher. That means a bigger import bill, more pressure on the rupee, and a nudge upward of inflation, right as the government has been trying to keep prices rising under control. LPG and LNG are the most fragile pieces here because unlike crude, you can't simply reroute a gas cargo from a different ocean overnight. So here's the picture I want you to leave with. A ceasefire brokered 8,000 kilometers away collapsed over a weekend. And within days, it had touched a port spent years building, rattled its stock market, nudged its currency, and pushed a question mark over the price of a gas cylinder in someone's kitchen in Bihar or UP. That's what it means to be, as India is the world's third largest oil importer, sitting downstream of a conflict it is not fighting. Diversification buys resilience, not immunity. And immunity was never really an offer. Keep an eye on the strait. Whatever happens there, next won't stay there. This is the India Report. I am Asad Ashraf. Thank you for watching.